She stood at the foot of the stairs with a glass of wine in her hand and fire in her eyes. No hesitation, no shame, just 5 cold words that changed everything. Submit to me or suffer. That's what Claire said, not yelled. Said, like a business deal, like terms of a contract. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. She wasn't bluffing. She meant it. We weren't screaming. We weren't even fighting. We were standing in the middle of what used to be our home, now more like a chessboard, and she'd just moved her queen straight across the board, daring me to flinch. The last few months had been a slow, suffocating burn. Claire had started changing her appearance, suddenly obsessed with new clothes, gym routines, expensive perfume she never wore around me. I noticed it, of course. Anyone would. But I didn't speak up, because every time I tried to connect, she shut me out with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. What I didn't know then was how deep the rot had gone. That night started quietly. She said she wanted to talk. We sat on opposite ends of the living room, like strangers negotiating a ceasefire. She poured herself wine and offered me nothing. Then she paced, slowly, casually, like a predator circling prey. And finally, she stopped and gave me that ultimatum. I asked her, submit to what? She didn't answer directly. She just raised an eyebrow and said, to the new dynamic, you're either with me or beneath me. No more questions. No more resistance. And that's when I knew. She wasn't just seeing someone else, she was modeling herself after him, acting like him, maybe even channeling whatever control he had over her. But the part that nearly made me laugh, because it was too absurd to cry, was how she assumed I'd say yes. That I'd roll over, like a good little husband. But I didn't. I stood up. I walked past her. I grabbed my keys. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I didn't ask her why. I didn't give her the performance she was waiting for. I just left. But the story doesn't end there. Not even close. Because what she didn't realize, what she never saw coming, was what I knew. And what I already had. I had the truth. And the truth was darker than even she could imagine. And I wasn't going to suffer. She was. Alone. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I missed her. Not even because I was heartbroken. It was the rage, quiet, calculated, cold. The kind of rage that simmers just beneath your skin and refuses to let you breathe. I sat in the driver's seat of my truck in a 24-hour parking lot outside a diner, staring at the steering wheel like it had answers. I wasn't confused. I wasn't asking why me. I knew exactly what had happened. Claire had crossed a line long ago. I just hadn't been ready to see it. But now, the blindfold was gone, and everything looked different. You see, weeks before that night, before her twisted ultimatum, I had started putting the pieces together. A series of late-night phone calls she took in the bathroom with the water running. Mysterious bank withdrawals she claimed were for gifts, yet never brought anything home. And the final straw? A parking ticket from a hotel downtown. A hotel we'd never stayed at. Dated the same night she told me she was at a yoga class. I'd taken photos. Every receipt. Every unusual expense. And I'd hired someone quietly. A guy named Nolan who'd done freelance work for a friend of mine in private security. Nolan didn't ask questions. He just got results. And what he showed me was something I'll never unsee. Claire hadn't just been cheating. She was training to leave me, grooming her exit like a snake sheds its skin. The man she was sleeping with? Not a stranger. Not some random fling. No, he was a client of hers. A tech guy, loaded with cash, divorced twice, known for dating younger women and fixer projects. She was trying to become his third trophy. I saw the photos, her clinging to his arm outside his condo, whispering into his ear in a bar she never mentioned, leaning into him with a smile I hadn't seen in years. But that wasn't what broke me. What broke me was the voice memo Nolan captured, Claire, on the phone with him, laughing. He's just stuck. He won't leave. He can't leave. That's the thing with good men. You push them, and they try harder. He doesn't even realize how done I am. That was 3 days before she told me to submit or suffer. She underestimated me. So when I walked out that night, I didn't go to fall apart. I went to prepare. I opened a new bank account. Called the lawyer I'd quietly met with once Nolan handed me the last batch of evidence. Put in a temporary address with my brother across state lines. Moved what I legally could. And then, I went silent. Not a word. No texts. No calls. No explanations. I vanished from her life completely. Claire thought she was playing chess. But she forgot I'd been quietly studying the board long before she made her move. She played to win, but she never noticed that I had already stopped playing. And soon, The game was going to collapse around her. Because the one thing Claire feared more than losing me was being truly alone when the mask finally fell. And that day was coming fast. It didn't take long for Claire to start unraveling. At first, I ignored the calls. 1 or 2 a day. Blocked number. Then her number. Then unknown again. She started sending emails, cryptic at first, then desperate. But I wasn't playing the savior anymore. I wasn't the man she could manipulate with a tear or a sultry apology. She'd burned that bridge when she laughed about how good men always stay. By the end of the first week, she cracked. The email that hit me hardest, because it reeked of panic. Read, where are you? We need to talk. This isn't what I wanted. No subject line. No greeting. Just that. As if the sound of her own world crumbling had finally echoed back in a way she couldn't ignore. She didn't know I'd frozen our joint accounts. Didn't know I'd transferred my pension to a protected trust. Didn't know the car lease was in my name, and I'd had it towed from the driveway she thought she controlled. I watched her from a safe distance, thanks to Nolan, as she opened the door to an empty garage one morning, barefoot in a silk robe, spinning in confusion like the world owed her an explanation. And her new lover? The tech guy? Yeah, he ghosted her. Turns out he wasn't interested in someone unraveling. Claire wasn't the first woman who mistook his weekend attention for long-term commitment. Once I went silent, and her new man saw the chaos that followed, he backed off fast. The guy was calculated. He didn't want a scene. And Claire was becoming one. When she showed up at my brother's place unannounced, I wasn't even there. She stood in the front yard like some sad ghost, claiming she needed just 5 minutes to explain. My brother told her I was gone, that she needed to respect my space. She cried, begged. He didn't budge. And then she snapped, screaming in the street that I had abandoned my duties as a husband. That line stuck with me. Not because it hurt, but because it revealed so much. She saw me as a duty, a role, a resource, something to control. Never a partner. Never a person. But I was done living as her asset. I gave her silence. Days turned into 2 weeks. Then 3. Then a full month. That's when the messages turned dark. You think this makes you strong? I never meant to hurt you. Why are you being so cruel? You're the one destroying this, not me. And finally, I need you to come back. I made a mistake. I'm scared. Scared. That was new. Claire, the woman who once stood in front of me like a queen with an army behind her, was now admitting fear. But it wasn't fear of losing me. It was fear of losing control, of losing her safety net, her backup plan. And that's when I realized. I hadn't walked away from my wife. I had walked away from a person who never truly loved me, but loved what I could offer. What came next wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was quiet, brutal clarity. I didn't need to ruin her. Life was already doing it for me. And she was going to learn exactly what suffering felt like, slowly, and very much alone. 3 months had passed since I disappeared from Claire's world, and every day she slipped deeper into the consequences she never thought she'd face. I hadn't blocked her completely, not because I wanted contact, but because I wanted to watch her spiral. A clean break would have meant she could tell herself whatever she needed to sleep at night. But leaving the line open just wide enough? That let the silence torment her. Every unanswered message, every ignored call was a mirror she had to stare into, and she hated what she saw. I kept tabs from a distance. Nolan's work hadn't stopped after I left. If anything, it intensified. He kept surveillance light but effective, bank activity, social media, a few discreet visits to the house. I knew about the eviction notice before she did. Turns out Claire hadn't paid the mortgage in 2 months. Not because she couldn't, she still had access to her personal funds, but because she thought I'd come crawling back and clean up the mess. Like always. Only this time, I didn't. I let her fail. I let her ignore the red envelopes piling up in the mailbox. Let her borrow money from her sister and lie about needing it for emergency dental work. Let her try to sell designer bags online that were actually knockoffs, ones the tech guy probably bought to impress her without spending too much. She tried going back to him, of course. Reached out, begged him to give her a second chance. I saw the texts. He responded with a single line. We had fun, but you're not my problem. That cut her deeper than anything I ever said. She didn't want him. She wanted what he represented, a ticket out, a fantasy life. And now, that fantasy had slammed the door in her face. But the moment everything truly changed came when she messaged me with a photo. It was of her sitting on the floor of the living room. No furniture. Just empty wine bottles, old takeout containers, and a mattress that looked like it had been dragged in from the garage. The caption? This is what you wanted? No. It wasn't what I wanted. It was what she chose. Every time she lied, every time she manipulated, every time she smiled while planning her escape. I didn't respond. I saved the photo, closed my laptop, and stepped outside. It was raining, and I let it hit my face for a full minute. Not for drama. For peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology or an explanation. I wasn't looking for closure. I had something better: distance, clarity, and a future no longer shackled to a woman who only saw love as a contract with terms in her favor. A few days later, Nolan sent me an audio file. It was Claire again, this time crying to a friend over the phone. I told him to submit. I didn't mean it like that. I thought if I pushed hard enough, he'd fight for me. I thought he'd stay. That told me everything I needed to know. She didn't want a partner. She wanted a prisoner. And when I walked away, I didn't just leave her. I broke her illusion. I shattered the lie she told herself, that she could destroy the foundation and still live in the house. But foundations don't rebuild themselves. And she was going to learn, piece by piece, what it felt like to sit in the ruins until there was no one left to blame but herself. It was mid-autumn by the time Claire hit bottom, though I doubt she realized it yet. The days were getting shorter, the leaves dying all around her, and so was every lie she'd built her life on. I watched from afar, not with glee, not even with satisfaction, but with quiet inevitability. There's a strange peace that comes with knowing someone's destruction didn't come from your revenge, but from their own decisions finally catching up. She had stopped messaging by then. No more emails. No more texts. Not because she was over me, oh no. She just shifted her energy elsewhere. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she was telling people I'd abandoned her without reason, that I'd snapped and disappeared into some mental health crisis, as if she were the poor, confused wife trying to hold it all together. She played the victim well, always had. But it doesn't take long for people to see through someone who keeps playing that same card while everything else around them crumbles. And crumble it did. Her job? Gone. Turns out, sleeping with clients wasn't just unethical, it left her wide open for scrutiny once one of them reported her out of spite. I don't know which man did it, but I suspect it wasn't the tech guy. Probably someone further down the list, someone she thought didn't matter. Her employer launched an internal investigation, and while they never made the details public, it was enough to get her fired. She lost her health insurance, her company credit card, and most of her professional contacts in less than 3 days. The house was foreclosed a month later. She didn't even try to fight it. Moved into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment outside town with stained carpets and a broken balcony railing. I drove past it once. The blinds were half closed, and a black trash bag was taped over one of the windows. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a consequence. But the moment I knew she'd finally felt what suffering really meant came unexpectedly. It wasn't a dramatic breakdown or another desperate message. It was something smaller, quieter. She sent me an envelope. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I hadn't seen since she used to leave love notes in my lunchbox during our first year of marriage. Inside was a single photo. It was from our wedding day. Me in a tux, her laughing with a flower crown tangled in her hair. On the back, she'd written 4 words. I ruined everything, didn't I? There was no request to talk. No apology. No explanation. Just the brutal weight of a woman realizing too late what she destroyed. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just sat with that photo for a while, then slipped it back into the envelope and put it in a box labeled closure. That box now sits in the back of my closet, next to the divorce papers, signed, processed, final. She thought I'd suffer. She thought leaving me would be a power move. But I didn't suffer. I rebuilt. I found peace. I found people who valued me not for what I could give, but for who I was. I started hiking again. I reconnected with old friends. I laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in years. And when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a man lost without her. I saw a man free from her. As for Claire, she's alone. Not in the dramatic, poetic sense. Literally alone. No family that talks to her. No man by her side. Just echoes of choices that looked like freedom, but turned out to be a cage she built with her own hands. And I haven't said a word to her since. It was a strange kind of irony. The woman who once demanded that I submit or suffer now lived in a world entirely shaped by her own suffering, with no one left to command. Life didn't punish Claire with fire and fury. It punished her slowly, with silence, with absence, with the kind of stillness that leaves you face to face with your own reflection and nothing left to blame. The funny thing is, I hadn't planned any of this. I didn't leave to watch her break. I left to stop breaking myself. I had no intention of being her reckoning. But reckoning doesn't always come through revenge. Sometimes it comes through letting someone live with the wreckage they caused. Claire's life had become a slow collapse, one misstep at a time. And even though she'd stopped reaching out, her world still occasionally leaked into mine in ways she never expected. One afternoon, I got a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, her cousin Madison. We were never close, but Madison always struck me as the only one in her family who saw through Claire's performance. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Her message was short. She's not okay. She's drinking a lot. Says you were the only person who ever made her feel like she mattered. She won't admit it, but she's unraveling. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. I knew better than to re-enter a house I had to set fire to just to escape. A week later, I ran into Claire by accident. It wasn't dramatic. We were at the same gas station, of all places. I stepped out of my truck and turned toward the pump, and there she was, 3 lanes over, staring at me like she'd just seen a ghost. Her posture collapsed. The confidence she used to carry like armor had vanished. She looked tired. Older. Not in years, but in weight. Life had pressed down hard on her. She started to walk toward me. I didn't move. I didn't look away either. I just waited. And when she got close, she said one thing. Do you hate me? I didn't expect the question. I thought she'd beg. Apologize. Plead for a second chance. But what I saw in her eyes wasn't hope. It was shame. And I gave her the only truth I had left. I don't think about you enough to hate you. That stopped her cold. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and finally just nodded. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned and walked back to her car. No yelling. No tears. No drama. Just quiet defeat. I watched her drive away, and I realized something important in that moment. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even a little. What I felt was pity. Not for what she'd done to me, but for how deeply she'd betrayed herself. Claire had wanted power. Control. She'd thought pushing me down would elevate her. But all she did was dig a pit for herself and confuse it for a throne. The next day, I packed the last box from the storage unit where I'd kept pieces of my old life. Photos, books, things I didn't know whether to keep or toss. I donated most of it, burned some of it, and that night, I took myself out to dinner. Alone. Not lonely. Just free. I don't know what the future holds for Claire. Maybe she'll change. Maybe she won't. But I know she'll never forget what she lost. Not just me, but the version of herself that existed when we were still whole. That woman is gone. And I'm not coming back to search for her. Because I didn't suffer. I survived. And she's the one still searching for something to submit to, with no one left to conquer. A full year passed before I ever heard her name again in conversation. By then, my life looked nothing like it used to. I had moved to a new city, taken a new job, bought a modest home on the edge of a small lake. The kind of place where quiet lives grow. Where no one knew my past unless I chose to share it. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on the porch, watching mist curl over the water, and my nights building furniture by hand in a garage that smelled like cedar and freedom. The pain didn't follow me there. The betrayal didn't echo through the walls. I had finally created a space that didn't carry her fingerprints. But peace isn't always immune to the past. It happened in the most ordinary way. I was at a dinner party hosted by one of my coworkers. Their cousin brought a date. The woman was friendly, sharp, well-spoken, and as it turned out, she used to work with Claire. Not closely, but enough to recognize my name when someone introduced me. Her eyes flicked with quiet recognition. Later, over a glass of wine, she asked if I was the Graham who used to be married to Claire Ellis. I smiled faintly. I was. She hesitated. Then, like curiosity had gotten the best of her, she said, I don't mean to overstep, but she really fell apart. It was hard to watch. I didn't respond. I didn't ask questions. But she continued anyway, like she'd been waiting to tell someone the story. She lost everything, didn't she? She said, almost gently. Her job. Her friends. I heard her own mom cut ties after some blow-up. People tried to be there for her at first, but it was like she didn't know how to be honest. She just kept spinning stories that didn't add up. I nodded once and excused myself to get more water. Not because I was hurt, but because I felt the ground shifting beneath me in a way I hadn't expected. I didn't want vengeance. I never had. But I realized, as I stood at the edge of that party and looked out the window at the soft glow of street lamps, that her downfall wasn't just a rumor. It was real, documented, whispered about, confirmed by people who had no reason to lie. Claire hadn't just stumbled, she'd shattered. And not because I'd pushed her, but because she had nothing solid underneath her once the performance ended. The next morning, I received something that finally closed the circle. It was a letter, handwritten, from her. The handwriting was messier than I remembered. There were smudges along the sides, as if she'd written it with tears still drying. She wrote that she was living in a women's shelter now. Said she had tried to get help, had burned every bridge along the way. She'd lost not just me, but her family, her reputation, and the future she once thought was guaranteed. She didn't ask for anything. No money. No second chance. She just confessed. I thought I was strong because I could make people bend. I didn't understand that real strength is staying when it's hard. You did that. I didn't. I thought you were weak because you loved me too much. But now I see, I was the weak one. And I think I always was. I sat with that letter for a long time. There was no pleasure in reading it. No closure like in the movies. Just a long, slow exhale of everything I'd carried. She didn't include a return address. And that told me she didn't expect redemption. She just needed someone, anyone, to know she finally understood the damage. The truth. The cost. I folded the letter and placed it in the same box as the wedding photo. Not because I wanted to hold on to it, but because some things deserve to be buried, not forgotten, but laid to rest with dignity. Claire declared I would suffer. That walking away would destroy me. But I had risen. And she had discovered the truth about suffering in the loneliest way imaginable. The lake froze early that year. I remember standing on the back deck one morning, watching the first thin layer of ice shimmer across the water's surface as the wind moved through the bare trees behind the house. Silence like that, complete, untouched, has a weight to it. It doesn't shout. It just sits. And I realized then that I had finally reached the far side of something I never imagined I'd escape. Claire never wrote again. No more letters. No more emails. No more messages passed through mutual acquaintances. Just silence. A deep, permanent kind. Like a candle snuffed out in a dark room. I kept the letter and the wedding photo tucked inside that same small box in the back of my closet, but I never opened it again. It doesn't call to me. I don't revisit it. It just exists. A relic of a different life. One I barely recognize anymore. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, when I'm driving with no music, or walking through the aisles of a grocery store and see a perfume bottle she used to wear, I remember her. Not the woman she became, but the girl she used to be. The one who laughed at my bad jokes. Who danced barefoot on the kitchen floor in the middle of the night. Who once looked at me like I was her favorite thing in the whole world. And I wonder what happened to that version of her. But I don't stay in that place for long. Because wondering doesn't change the truth. That version of her left long before I did. And maybe she never really existed. Maybe I only saw what I wanted to see. Maybe love makes us blind until we're forced to look in the dark. I never remarried. Not because I couldn't, but because part of me is still learning how to trust silence. How to trust peace without waiting for it to explode. I meet people. I laugh. I feel joy. But there's always that shadow, the quiet knowledge that once I loved someone who turned it into a weapon. Claire taught me that not every wound bleeds. Some just echo. And yet, despite it all, I don't hate her. She was lost. She was selfish. She broke me. But in the process, she taught me what not to be. She made me rebuild from nothing. And that rebuild, slow, painful, sometimes lonely, became the most honest version of myself I've ever known. There's a gravestone in my heart with her name on it. Not because she's gone, but because the life I shared with her is buried, deep beneath the lessons it gave me. And every now and then, when the wind howls just right across the lake, I swear I hear her voice, distant, faded, softer than before. She said I would suffer. She was right. But the thing she never understood is, some of us suffer forward. Some of us let the pain teach us how to rise, not in anger, not in revenge, but in quiet, defiant peace. And maybe that's the saddest ending of all. Because I survived. And she never truly did.